This is basically one chapter in my new book, Picnic, Lightning, which is the aforementioned In Search of a New Reality. And just to describe the book very briefly, when I started writing the book, it was right before the Brexit vote. It was a few months before Trump's election. And even then, I noticed that these were strange times for reality, because a lot of our sort of more technological progress was focusing on ideas of virtual reality and augmented reality. And that seemed to be a new frontier, being able to sit in your kitchen and put a headset on and suddenly there's a coral reef there while you're in the kitchen as well. And augmented reality, you can go around a museum, hold your phone up and be given all these sort of extra bits of data, sort of augmenting your real experience. But it seemed to me that we hadn't really got our hands fully on the ropes when it came to the nuts and bolts of our everyday realities, just the physical surroundings, what it's like to be in a room with solid tables, solid chairs. It seemed a bit sort of previous, or rather precocious, to suddenly start going on and saying we have this solid base that we call reality, and then we're going to make it virtual and make it augmented. And really, one of the main ways that I thought our reality was being sort of challenged or compromised in these times is many reasons, but one of the ways I felt that our private realities and our public realities were becoming dangerously merged together, and that we were no longer had a clear division between the private reality, perhaps of the home, of our bodies, of our private thoughts, and how we manifest in the public sphere. So there's just a few things that I talk about in the book before we get to the idea of obscenity, which sort of are on this theme of the collapse of the public and private reality. And one of them is the Internet of Things. And my editor was saying, oh, don't write about the Internet of Things. Everyone knows about it already. And I could never tell whether the Internet of Things was one of those things that everyone knows about or that no one knows about. And there was a lot of sort of scandal about a fridge. Fridges aren't normally scandalous things, but Samsung developed a smart fridge. If it has smart on it, it usually means it's connected to the Internet of Things. It's the ecosystem of appliances in your house perhaps, that can be sort of controlled remotely and communicate with other devices. And there was a Samsung fridge which leaked, and it didn't leak water, which my fridge often does, but it leaked people's Gmail passwords. So it was sort of a soft target in the home security system, so that you could, your sort of private details could be hacked through this fridge. So no one liked that. But the Internet of Things is interesting for me, because you know that feeling at the end of the day when you realize that you're out of public life for the day, you're closing down the house, you're turning the lights off room by room, and there's a sense of sort of fortification that this is me in my private sphere, I'm no longer in public. And to me, the very idea of the Internet of Things compromises this idea by the sense that our household belongings are out somewhere else, up in the cloud, communicating, sending data, receiving data. That the really sort of solid walls of the home, which really have been sort of a psychological and emotional buttress for humans for a long time, are being sort of rewired, and the home is much more porous than it used to be. This is a campaign from earlier this July with Tommy Hilfiger. And Tommy Hilfiger has launched a new brand of smart wearable clothing. It's called their Connect series, or their Go Explore with the Connect Tommy Hilfiger range. And basically it's clothes with Bluetooth in it. So if you're wearing a Tommy Hilfiger Bluetoothed up piece of clothing, when you walk by shops, you get rewards on your phone. You become a little brand ambassador for them. They're able to track where you are at all times. They know what you're buying, if you're buying from them or not, etc. So there's this idea that there's sort of one of the most private relationships we have is the cloth on our bodies, and the fact that even that is being sort of linked in. And there was a designer, sort of a tech designer in 2014, who predicted that the future of wearables would go way beyond just the Fitbit and how many steps and your heart rate and stuff, and move into clothing itself. And he said what would be really exciting for him as a third-party sort of advertiser would be to be able to tell how we were feeling, how our heart rate was doing, how various biometrics were reading in our body. It's like we were strapped up to an ICU device at all times through our clothing. And then through that biometric data, he'd be able to, what he said, give me relevant offers through my phone, depending on how the clothes were telling him that I was feeling at any one moment. But it all speaks to this way in which the private self and the public self is becoming rendered much more of a hybrid. This is the influencer. Now, I love the name, the influencer. It reminds me of a Batman villain. Like, the influencer is in town. And what's so great about the name of the influencer, it doesn't even sort of describe what it's trying to do. You know, built into the very name is the idea that I will be manipulating you. So influencers, for those who don't know, is sort of a generic term for someone who's amassed such a large online following. Say on Instagram, they may have 80,000 followers on Instagram. And as such, advertisers will pay them to advertise their products. Now, this isn't especially new. We've had spokespeople for many years, but it's unusual that so many so-called ordinary citizens are becoming poster people for brands. So this is an example of an influencer. And how it works is within sort of the everyday life of the influencer, they may have regular photographs of themselves, but then one will be a sponsored post in which they're wearing a paid, these sunglasses, for instance, she may have been paid to wear them. But unless you click on the image and see some of the captions, you won't necessarily know what is the sponsored item. You know, by law, you have to say this is an ad or a sponsored partnership with someone in the fine print somewhere. But if you're just scrolling through these pages, it's very hard to sort of tell what is sort of someone's personal choice and what is a commercial relationship. And I had a bit of a dream that I never have prophetic dreams while I was writing this book, but I had one in which I was thinking about influencers, and I had a dream about a little boy in the near future, and also the little boy was me. So it was one of those dreams. But this little boy was at a restaurant and looking through the menu, and he couldn't decide what to have. And he said to his parents, oh, you know what? I just can't remember what I actually like and what I'm paid to like. And I thought that was sort of a very dystopic, high-concept vision of the future. So if anyone wants to turn that into a movie, you're welcome to do so. I'm not going to pursue that any further. You may recognize this woman. This is Kim Kardashian. She is sort of a poster person sort of on a huge scale of the person who's commodified their private lives. And in 2016, there was a notorious selfie of Kim Kardashian in which she posed herself naked in her bathroom, and she put black bars over her private parts herself, which was a funny display of sort of self-censorship and self-revelation all at once. And now, while that got lots of attention, what interested me more was the way in which the backstage view that Kim Kardashian has made her sort of bread and butter, as it were, was fully on display. So people might be looking at this selfie of her and thinking, oh, but those are the actual pot lights that Kim Kardashian has. That's the beige towel in her cream bathroom. And there's a sort of an insatiable interest that we seem to be cultivating in the behind-the-scenes view all the time. And that's the main argument that I want to propose to you, is that the backstage view or the behind-the-scenes view has become the central view in our digital cultural life. And what are some of the ramifications for that? So here we come to the word obscene and the idea of obscenity. People, when they say, you know, digital life is a big problem of digital life is its obscenity. You might think that we're talking about internet pornography and the proliferation of pornographic images and the huge problem that is causing for young people, especially being doused all the time, saturated in internet pornography. And that's a very real concern and should be talked about. But my proposition is that there's another form of obscenity which is arguably more pervasive and structural and sort of now built into the very form of our lives. And what's good for me to make this argument is that the word obscene etymologically has a sort of a forked root. Etymologists aren't quite sure where we get obscene from. There's the Latin root obscenum, and scenum here refers to sort of filth or muck, or sometimes buttocks or genitals. So that's sort of the moralizing view, which would be linked the obscene to pornography, something so-called filthy or dirty or whatever. But there's also a lot of credible evidence to suggest that obscene comes from the Greek, and it comes from obscene. My Greek isn't that great, but when I was reading the audiobook, the producer showed me it was called skene. If anyone wants to correct me, you're welcome to. I just generally call it obscene. And that literally means the off-stage or the off-scene perspective, and that's what many people think our idea of obscenity comes from. So what was this little skein or skenaire? Well, this takes us back to the 5th century BC into the theatre of Dionysus.